Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, August 1st, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, David Freedlander of New York Magazine will be with us to talk about Trump's latest scam, his social media company. And later in the show, Palestinian lawyer Diana Buttu will join us to update us on Gaza and the Israeli mob storming torture camps to protect the torturers. Also on the program today, Trump implodes during a disastrous panel at the National Association of Black Journalists Convention, questioning Harris's racial identity and attacking the panelists. The UAW endorses Kamala Harris, and Sean Fain expresses VP preferences, Bashir or Walz. Harris moves to the center on immigration, scraps past support, at least on paper, for single-payer and a federal jobs guarantee. Another crappy Peter Thiel candidate, Blake Masters, loses his second election.
Oh,
So sad, so sad.
it's a good day, folks.
This time in Arizona's congressional primary, he lost to another MAGA freak who
can
Trump,
stop
I
with-
think, also endorsed.
He can stop pretending to be a Christian now.
Yep. It's so odd. Who would pretend to be another part of their identity for electoral gain?
It's weird. It's weird.
It's weird. Another MAGA freak, Carrie Lake, easily wins her primary in Arizona, so she'll face Gallego for Sinema's Senate seat in September, officially. November. Not September. Russia and the United States are in the midst of a massive prisoner swap that includes Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and ex-U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. Could this bring hopes for a peace deal? As Russia's war in Ukraine is in its third year, some Ukrainians clamor for some kind of truce. Ceasefire talks are once again in peril after Israel killed a top leader of the group they were negotiating with. The IDF murders 2 more journalists in Gaza. Border arrests dropped to a record low during Biden's presidency, not that you would know it from the press. Senate Democrats will shortly force a vote on the child tax credit bill. Republicans will kill it, even though they got their pro-business tax goodies. New federal protections for trans students will take effect this week. And lastly, the leader of Sudan's military government has rescinded his ceasefire talk offers after an apparent assassination attempt, potentially by the RSF. We shall see. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an EmMajority Report Thursday. I am here with my friends Matt Leck.
Hello.
And Bradley Alsop. We could call him a friend, but I don't know. I don't know why.
August to August, huh?
I mean, it really is the dog
going on there?
days. The dog days of summer over here.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that Blake Masters lost. That completely missed my attention. I've been sort of, listening to American Prestige talk about Iran and that sort of stuff. And but turns out there is good news and there's a reason for living because people like Blake Masters will continue failing.
And
probably.
hopefully JD Vance, too, as well.
I mean, that would be the biggest present.
This would be the most triumphant destruction of the Peter Thiel funded candidate on the largest stage, JD Vance. I mean, what did we see his net approval right now after 1 week move from -7 to -15? Now, that would be a pretty good, almost record-breaking golf tournament score.
Like Tiger in his prime over here.
Yeah, Trump comes in like, no, I'm minus 16. Speaking of Trump, so he had a meltdown yesterday at the National Association of Black Journalists convention in Chicago. A complete meltdown. We're going to play for you the beginning, and you'll just see how from right out of the gate, Donald Trump just could not handle any questioning. He complained about audio levels throughout the entire interview. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. It's like, again, the narrative has been entirely flipped on who's old in this race. Trump rambled incoherently and couldn't hear people on the stage, which is an old man problem that we no longer have to deal with because thank God Biden dropped out of the race. But he was triggered. He was angry. He was pissy. The three panelists were, one was Katia Goba of Semaphore. Shout out to our friend of the show, Dave Weigel. That was great that Semaphore got a representative there, and she did awesome. Rachel Scott of ABC News, you'll see, is the one who's closest to Trump in the blue, and she was the one who he was so furious with the entire time. Great job by those two, because the third panelist was Harris Faulkner of Fox News, Republican, obviously. And she gave him the friendliest questions, but even she at one point went, oh my goodness, because it was going so poorly. And, you know, I saw a lot of people say, like, why give Trump a platform? We talked about this a bit before the show. You know, he's running for president of the United States. I just really...
He's actually maybe leading the race. Like, arguably.
I mean, look, like... in a week or two, we may not know if that may not be true, but mathematically, in terms of polling averages, he's still in the lead.
He has been leading it.
Yes. So we need to platform him more, especially in settings like this that are adversarial, because he shows the worst of himself. And I thought there was nothing new I could learn about Donald Trump. And you don't learn anything new, but it is at least good to remind people of the worst of this person. So here he is. As soon as he sits down, this was the first question.
Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country. Including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and you know, and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money, they were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. they couldn't get their equipment working or something
Mr.
was wrong.
President, I would love
I think
if you
it's
can
a
answer the
very
question
nasty
on your rhetoric
question.
and why you
I have
believe that
answered the
black voters should
question.
trust you with another
I
4
have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Better than President
That's
Johnson,
my
who signed the
answer.
Voting Rights
And
Act?
for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace. I really do.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead. How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition
DEI.
of that? Give me a definition.
Sir,
of
I'm
that.
asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define it for me, if you
I
would.
just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So, I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly, very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect either
historically black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length. And we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that.
All right,
so she's not DEI? Is that
so
what I'm
she's
thinking?
not. So he can't answer it. I wanted to play that entire exchange because obviously people are seeing the part about Harris and how, I don't know if she's a DEI candidate or not. But you see how immediately he responds to a woman and a woman of color questioning him about things he said in the past. He never addressed any of the stuff that he had to say there. And
the birtherism or anything like, because he's afraid. He actually birthered Kamala, saying she might not be a citizen because of her parentage. 4 years ago, and he's running away from it because he's a pussy.
Because and then pull up. This is what now they're running on. They are running on the fact that they're trying to say that she's actually Indian. She was. Look, this would be a really long game if she were, I don't know, Rachel Dolezalling this, faking who her father was, faking going to a historically black university, Howard University.
White people can go to HBCUs, and they do, but yeah, I mean, the idea that she's faking being a black person is insane.
Black female sorority, it's insane. He posts this on his Truth Social this morning. Thank you, Kamala, or they've been all mispronouncing her name. Kamala.
It's the Democrat Party thing. It's
they're just trying to mess with her. For a nice picture you sent from many years ago, your warmth, friendship, and love of your Indian heritage are very much appreciated. So they were also blasting a photo of this at a rally of hers last night, essentially showing a Business Insider article that said she was the first Indian American senator, which is true because she wasn't the first black senator.
Also, Laura Loomer's like, she has some white descendants from her Caribbean side. It's like, I wonder how that happened. And then we're doing like a quantum blood ruling for being white now instead of if you're black or non-white, which is just a flip side of it.
This is why he has to debate her, because Trump wants to look like a strong man. But when you trigger him like this, when he feels on the defense, when he sees those numbers for J.D. Vance, this is the guy that's obsessed with ratings. You heard that within the first 5 minutes of the interview. He knows when numbers look bad, and it makes him angrier than anything because he wants to be in the lead. He wants to be winning. He wants to appear like he's winning. So women, he has a difficulty with them. It didn't translate in the way that it could have if Hillary Clinton didn't have so many problems when he called her a nasty woman. But he calls this ABC reporter within seconds nasty because that's his go-to for any woman that's challenging him. For his supporters, honestly, I think they may look at this interview and not think it's the disaster that we do, because I think his supporters look at this and they go, well, look, see, you tried with them. You showed up with them.
There were some people cheering in that room.
There were some people cheering in that room. And, you know, like, I think he can say to his supporters, see, I tried to talk to them and look at how they are. This is how they are. They don't accept anybody unless you're a DEI candidate or unless you want people to riot in the streets. I mean, we'll play more of the interview later, but there were things he said there, like he returned to the black jobs refrain. He said that the police shooting of Sonia Massey could have been a, quote, innocent mistake. He said he was the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. He said that in that clip. He compared the January 6th riots to Black Lives Matter and then also the protests against the genocide in Gaza that happened last week in D.C. And then with J.D. Vance, I mean, all he could talk about was the fact that he went to Yale and he couldn't define why he was good for the ticket. This is why I think Trump needs to be put in more of these situations, because he can't react well when he's on the defense, especially if it's a woman that's questioning him. And this is part of what we said about why Biden dropping out would be big in terms of drumming up the negative partisanship and reminding regular people that this is what this party stands for. And these were the offensive and persistent kind of scandals that we had to deal with throughout Trump's presidency. Most people just don't want to deal with that anymore. So highlighting that contrast is really effective.
And they didn't want in 2020. It remains to be seen if people are ready for it in enough to win in 2024. But I will just say, like, generically that is an inappropriate question for you journalists to ask me, a politician. Look, we have plenty of critiques of the media here. That's not an appropriate thing for any politician to say to a journalist. Like, you are the one who is here, and it's everybody, and you are the servant. So whether it's Marjorie Taylor Greene and that British journalist like a few weeks ago that we covered, or
Carrie Lake,
or was it Carrie Lake? Oh,
yeah,
Carrie Lake,
yeah,
whatever,
whichever crazy,
same damn thing. Or whether it was the White House spokespeople who like to take this. How dare you? How dare you
besmirch my character?
Yeah, no, you're besmirched.
Yeah,
like
right.
by the nature of your profession.
Right.
So like, try to unsmirch yourself.
Right, exactly. Like, if you're gonna act indignant, I mean, at least have some fucking dignity. With that said, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be speaking with David Freedlander about Trump and his latest multi-billion-dollar grift. We'll be right back.
Hey, remember when you chose your internet service provider? You weighed out which ones don't keep my data and which ones do. No, you don't, because internet service providers are basically monopolies in the vast majority of places where all of us live. Data caps, bandwidth throttling, the list goes on. Worst of all, like I say, ISPs have the ability to keep a log of every website you visit. And so can a ton of other third parties as well, unless you use ExpressVPN. I want to thank ExpressVPN for supporting the Majority Report. And here's the deal. So visit expressvpn.com/majority and you can get an extra 3 months free. Without ExpressVPN, these third parties can still see every website you see, even in incognito mode. Your internet service provider, your mobile network provider, your admin of your Wi-Fi network, if you're at your school, your boss, your parents, whatever. And the thing I love about ExpressVPN is that this VPN, it's so easy to use. Like, literally, you go in and I don't think I have any private information here. You just go, you press one button, you connected. Bingo, that's it. Now, I can choose I'm in New York, or I could choose like, well, wait a second, maybe I'm in Australia. And maybe I want to see something different on the Netflix account. Whatever, that's not important now. ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers. Like I say, you can choose all those different countries. So third parties can't see your browsing history. It hides your IP address, making it extremely difficult for third parties to track your online activity. It's easy to use. Like I say, fire up the app, click one button, you get protected. You can do that on your phone. You can do it on your laptop. You can do it on your tablets. You can do it on your Wi-Fi router, on your smart TV. It's super easy. And it's rated #1 by top tech reviews like CNET and The Verge. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/majority. That's PRESSVPN.com/majority, and you can get an extra 3 months free. ExpressVPN.com/majority. Check our YouTube and podcast description for the link. And now back to Emma.
We are back, and we are joined now once again by David Freedlander, New York Magazine contributor, author of The AOC Generation, How Millennials Are Seizing Power and Rewriting the Rules of American Politics. I'm quoted and interviewed in the book if people want to check it out. Jesus. And then his latest piece is How to Buy a President. Donald Trump's joke of a media company is also a $6 billion meme stock and an unprecedented opportunity for corruption. David, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the plug. Plug for both of us.
It's a great book. And I got to show it to my parents when they wondered what the hell I was doing with my life. So it was great evidence that I wasn't just, I don't know, smoking weed all the time or something like that. So appreciate that. Anyway, this piece that you have in New York Magazine is really phenomenal because Sam and I have been talking on air, off air about Truth Social for quite a while, wondering, okay, so how are they going public? Like, how is it possible that this social media company that amounts to Trump's personal blog is about to get an IPO? Like, how is that humanly possible? Your piece dives into that, so let's just start there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, Truth Social is a thing that, I think people know about and has been written about quite a bit, some really heroic work in the Washington Post, Guardian, Reuters, the Times, elsewhere, but kind of the whole sort of story hasn't been told. I don't know if have you ever spent time on Truth Social by any chance?
I mean, really only there to collect Donald Trump's tweet or posts so that we can talk about them on the show. Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason anyone is on it, even to the extent that anyone is on it. It's like a social media ghost town. I mean, there's really very few people on it. I was just at the RNC, and not only is it hard to find delegates who are on it, even the kind of right-wing media, that's should be on it. When they throw up their, the crawl at the bottom of the screen, they provide their Twitter account, their Rumble account, whatever other. They don't provide their True Social account. Right. So it's a social media ghost town. And what people don't realize is what happened is that Trump, he was kicked off of Twitter. He was mad about it, and then he had to be kind of persuaded to pursue this other option of a new sort of social media company. And some people who were former contestants on The Apprentice, actually, which, sort of surprising. I think that there's there's still a sort of network of former Apprentice contestants. But anyway, they came to him with this idea, and then it kind of grew. And in so growing, it sort of it attracted just all manner of reprobate, ne'er-do-well. I mean, it became just a hive of corruption almost immediately. And not all of that was from Trump, but it's just somehow you sort of, run the Trump flag up the flagpole, and all these the worst people on earth just kind of, come to it, flock to it, so to speak.
So I want to read this part from your piece here, Bradley, if we could pull it up, because this is it's staggering. It's just a few paragraphs in, but you set the stage so well that this Trump going public here, the entity that exists because of that thought, ticker symbol DJT, last price $31.45, is something unprecedented in financial or political history. It represents a company, Trump Media and Technology Group, that has a single product, the social networking platform Truth Social. The business operates at a staggering loss and is widely considered worthless, but the stock, DJT, has a market capitalization of roughly $6 billion. That's the same as Alcoa. Its value is purely a proxy for Trump's political power. He controls 58.7% stake. It's an incredible dynamic. A presidential candidate is the majority owner of a publicly traded instrument that tracks his political fortunes, soon to result in a literal fortune that he can use any way he likes. Trump is temporarily barred from selling his shares, but when a restriction expires in September, he can begin to turn his paper gains into real ones. He can pay off what once appeared to be punishingly large legal penalties in a stroke, fund the home stretch of his campaign, or simply pocket the money. The board, and then you go on to say how Don Jr. and Linda McMahon are on the board, but then this part really just was shocking if we could go to this part where it talks about their revenue. In May, Trump Media announced quarterly revenue of $million? No, $770,500 and losses of $328 million. It's a company that essentially has the revenue of not even a medium-sized McDonald's franchise, says John Reckenthaler, a researcher at Morningstar. So, okay, I just wanted to read your words because it's almost... It's almost self-parody. I mean, when you lay it out like that, this looks like nothing other than a massive scam and another fraudulent attempt by Trump, who just, by the way, was convicted of 34 counts on felony charges of fraud.
Yeah, I mean, like this one, and the other thing I don't think people don't quite realize is like there have already been several people who have been convicted or pled guilty to insider trading when this thing began. I mean, like I walked to the trial of someone who was was being on trial by the Southern District of New York. And I went to the trial, and you have to like walk past the Trump trial to get to this other trial of someone who's accused of fraudulent, doing insider trading to pocket the money around this thing. So, I mean, yeah, like there is no business here. That's the kind of thing. It is just simply a way to like invest in Trump, and then all these other kind of invest in Trump, and also I should say, like influence Trump. I mean, if you wanted to influence, presidential candidate Donald Trump, is it better to give money to his campaign, give money to a super PAC, even in the hundreds of millions of dollars, or is it better to just give him money? Like, what do you think would influence him more? I think most of us who have like followed Donald Trump's career recognize that like the way to influence Donald Trump is just to kind of give him money. And this is like essentially a kind of open pocketbook, with a sign saying "Feed me" on it. And so I think that's a little bit what's happening here, is why you have a stock price that's so divorced from what the actual business is.
So how did this? So you mentioned that the best way to get to Donald Trump is to say that to just give him money. Apparently, this company got off the ground in part because the pitch to Trump from one of these guys who was on The Apprentice with him was that he wouldn't have to invest any money himself, and that's something he really enjoyed. How did it get off the ground? Who are these folks that are running it for him, and how far back does that connection go?
There's two guys who were on season 2 of The Apprentice, which as a reporter was an occasion to, if I confess, go back and watch The Apprentice for the first time. You watch it now, and it's just so cheesy of a television show in those early seasons, but it's impossible to imagine that like that guy became president of the United States and then would find himself really rich because these two guys who like their main task was to set up like a Levi's advertising shoot, and they messed it up because according to Trump, they didn't have enough butt shots at the catalog. So he fired them. Fast forward like 15 years later, strange turn of events. One of the guys in that show has been president of the United States and has been, led a riot on the Capitol and then kicked off social media companies, platforms. Anyway, those guys now come back to them and say, hey, we have this great idea. What if we kind of like took you public as a stock, essentially? And if you recall, there were these SPACs, basically these vehicles at the time, which were really popular to kind of take companies public. And that was how they, decided to go about this, essentially. And, the original idea, and I don't think this company will kind of ever get there for one reason or another, was to also have a video streaming component to it, to kind of be like the Netflix of the conservative media. And there were shows that were pitched like American Zumo, which was just taking, two overweight Americans and having them sumo wrestle. There were shows like, go ahead. Would you say something?
No, I just incredible. Go on.
Shows like there was one that was going to be a reality TV show, like the Osbournes or something that was kind of like at home with the Conways, about George and Kellyanne Conway. Another show was going to be about just sort of Donald Trump golfing with Tiger Woods. These, as far as I know, if they're even in development, are not that far advanced off the drawing board.
Well, something that was also fascinating in your piece was to discover what I think a lot of books and reporting had indicated, that Trump really didn't want to win in 2016, or didn't plan to win at the very least. Devil's Bargain, which is a really good book on this, dives into it, that he was trying to make money through his presidential run, and then he just kind of was beloved by the base, but he even didn't really expect to beat Hillary Clinton in many ways, and was making plans to launch his own social media company afterwards. So like the framework of this idea seemed to at least be there, but now it's just a way for him to make money where he's lost a lot through legal fees and also just the fallout from his very toxic kind of political brand as well.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I mean, he's going to be staggeringly rich on this thing. I'm not sure people have quite wrapped their heads around it. I mean, it is a company, with no real business, but because he owns, I think 90% of the shares or something, eventually he'll cash those out. And I mean, the estimates are that, he could make over $1 billion on this. I mean, he'll be far more successful at this than he was in any of his other, entities, including real estate, including reality TV. And yeah, I mean, I think that this was always sort of seemed like, being a kind of media entrepreneur seemed like a much more comfortable fit for Donald Trump, I think, than, being, say, president.
Yeah, definitely. So with him making money off of this, can you talk a little bit about how this could be extremely problematic from a presidential immunity framework? You write about this a bit, but since presidents, if he were to get reelected, now have the immunity for official acts, right? This creates a lot of wiggle room for Donald Trump, even if he doesn't do what traditionally presidents had been obliged to do, which is put their shares into a blind trust or to divest from shares entirely before becoming president. This probably gives him a little bit more runway to do what he would want to do in terms of enriching himself as president.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I've been reading the book of Katie Rogers, American Woman, on the sort of first ladies that's kind of around Jill Biden, and it was complicated to get her to figure out a way that she could teach community college in Virginia. It was something that had to be navigated by what they thought were ethics guidelines in the White House. In Trump's case, I mean, I think that the presidential immunity stuff that came down in the last Supreme Court term doesn't even Trump, so he already has some immunity from that decision. I mean, this is actually there's obviously very unethical stuff around owning this publicly traded company that's wrapped up in your identity and persona. But in a way, in many ways, this is sort of in this gray area that kind of tilts toward actual legality more than illegality. I mean, I think that the people I spoke with said that, the hotel that he owned, or Mar-a-Lago, the club in Florida, that was sort of much closer to a violation of the Emoluments Clause, which prohibits any federal official from receiving gifts from a foreign entity or from the United States government. This is complicated because if you buy stock in this company, even in large amounts, you're kind of just buying stock in the company. And we all know that all that will go to Donald Trump, but you can kind of like innocently do it in a way that like, look, I'm buying like, a whole suite of hotel rooms so that you'll approve my merger. Which is a thing that actually did happen when Trump was president before. And that case kind of essentially got thrown out when Trump left office. But this is like a more complicated version of that emoluments violation.
Well, in part because of how we have deregulated Wall Street, which I think is the other story here, where you can have a scam where Trump could be running away with $1 billion, as you say, where he's trading a worthless company on the stock exchange and was able to get an IPO. How does he even get an IPO for this is my question.
Well, I guess there are these vehicles, these SPACs that are, I think they're called special something project acquisition corporations or something, and that's what they do. They sort of float around and they take companies public, and that's what happened here. I mean, it took longer than they thought it would because there were almost from the start, there were like mysterious investors from offshore who were investing in this thing. Some with, for example, ties to the Russian government, ties to the Russian mafia, and then there was like a kind of almost immediately there were. An insider trading investigation into what happened here. As I said, at the top, it's like as soon as this thing, began, it's like all sorts of reprobates kind of flocked to it. And so it took longer than it probably would have otherwise. But, I think it went public like any other company goes public.
I guess I was innocently thinking that you would need to show a little bit more proof of revenue in order to get that kind of offering. I mean, is it really this? It's really just that even though they're making that little money, that you could go public because another part of your piece is showing that on Wall Street Bets, that Reddit page, all those day traders are heavily involved in this stock. Could you talk about that angle as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's right, because like the money, the business is making no money, but the stock is, making some money for people who are sort of wisely choosing, when to buy and when to sell, I think. And so, I mean, it's just a kind of like financialization of everything. And it's like, it's also like the politicalization of the financial markets, which I think is like a really new thing. It's like politics is so infected all aspects of our lives these days that, you can't sort of buy a coffee maker without making a political statement or like somehow being a part of your political tribe. And now it's like the same thing, I think, in the stock market, essentially, where you can kind of like, fly your partisan flag by, which stocks you invest in.
Right. So I guess it's a way to show support for Donald Trump by buying his stock from his supporters. Maybe it's why he was able to scam everybody with those NFTs and things like that. That's just, there's maybe more of a market out there than I would hope. But appreciate your time today, David. Everybody should read the piece. It's called How to Buy a President in New York Magazine. David Freedlander, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be with Diana Buttu. we are back, and we are joined by Diana Buttu, Palestinian lawyer, former advisor to the negotiating team of the Palestine Liberation Organization. Diana, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So, obviously, it's not humanly possible for us to bring you on and not talk about the horrors. There's no really good news to share at this moment, but I'm hoping that I could get your thoughts on what happened earlier this week with Israeli activists and members of the Israeli government, including members who were a part of the majority coalition, storming Sidi Teiman, which is a torture camp in the Negev, to protest the fact that not that Palestinians were being tortured there, but to protest the fact that there were 9 soldiers detained and being questioned about gang raping a Palestinian prisoner. Just take us through the events of earlier this week.
Certainly. Thanks very much for having me. Look, this actually goes back a long time ago, but I'll start with the more immediate, which is since October of 2023. So since October of 2023, Israel took a decision that it was going to transform what was an army base into a torture camp, as you exactly put it. And in this torture camp, Israel has picked up thousands of Palestinians from Gaza and from other places as well in the West Bank, and taken them down to this torture camp that is in the southern part of the country. It's very far away. We actually don't know the full numbers. We're told upwards of 21,000 Palestinians have been abducted in this manner. The vast majority of them are being held without charge, without trial, without even knowing whether they will ever be able to leave this prison camp, this torture camp. Now, since there has been so much overcrowding, we've seen that Israel has actually released a number of Palestinians. And the Palestinians who are being released, and I've spoken to quite a number of them, are all talking about the same system of torture, of being shackled 24 hours a day, being placed in the fetal position, the shackles so tight that some people have had to have their hands and feet amputated, with daily torture, with not being allowed access to water, not being allowed access to have a shower, being forced to eat food that is filled with maggots, and so on. And so with these testimonies that have come out, and they've been coming out quite regularly since October until the current day, one would think that there would have been a great pressure on Israel to end these torture camps. Instead, there's been silence, and it took a long period of time before we even heard a peep from the UN Special Rapporteur on torture to say something. Now, what happened this past week is that we've had a number of investigations that have come out from CNN, from the New York Times, and from the BBC, and now the Washington Post, which is talking about not just torture, but also raping of people who've been held in these prison camps. And this week, the military advocate general decided that he was going to question 9 soldiers who are involved, who are alleged to be involved in this gang rape. Now, just the mere questioning of these soldiers set off a firestorm of riots inside Israel. We had first a number of members of Knesset who then pushed for people within the Israeli right, and it's not just the right wing; it's kind of mainstream now. That's
why I don't even like to say right wing or far right activists, because this is indicative of Israeli society.
It's totally indicative, exactly. So about 200 of them stormed Seder Teiman in the south, and they actually tried to beat the soldiers who were trying to go in and ask for them to be questioned. The 9 alleged individuals barricaded themselves, pepper sprayed the police, and so this massive riot began. From there, after the 9 soldiers were then taken from Seder Teiman in the south, they were then taken to a little bit north of Tel Aviv, where we then saw yet another riot on the part of Israeli activists, including members of Netanyahu's own coalition and within his own party. and with them calling for the release of these 9 and saying that these people are heroes. And so what we're seeing today is exactly a reflection of Israel, which is that they're protesting the right to be able to rape Palestinians. And we even saw within the Israeli Knesset that there was a semi-debate where one member of Knesset said, is it legitimate to be forcing objects into the rectum of Palestinians? And another member of Knesset responded and said, yes, it is. It's totally legitimate. So what we're seeing now is that there's a push to demand the right to be able to rape Palestinians. And it just shows you how far the Israeli society is willing to go without any, because there are no restraints on them. Nobody is saying that things are illegal. And when you constantly position yourself as that everything is justifiable, then you can obviously justify the worst forms of human action. And that's exactly what is happening in Israel today.
Right. And the only reason we should say that these soldiers are even being detained or questioned is because of this international pressure, and because honestly Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government want to continue with the worst of the genocide in Gaza. And this also plays into their efforts to, I think, widen this war, to draw the United States into it, and to make it not about Gaza, but about how Israel is constantly under threat. I guess we could get to that in a little bit because I want to touch more on the conditions here. There have been reports now for months that prisoners were being raped with metal rods, sometimes hot metal rods, burning their anuses to the point where they no longer had control of their faculties. And this is, I think, the detention arm of Israel's categorization of all Palestinian men, or a great majority of them, and boys, as basically combatants. Can you talk about that process and how that has basically midwifed the wholesale detention of up to tens of thousands of Palestinian men? And we don't even know, again, the death toll in Gaza. I saw some doctors were citing a figure as high as 92,000 at this point.
Yes, we don't know the precise toll. The Lancet came out and said that it may be 186,000. Friends who've been in Gaza on medical missions say that the number is probably even higher than that. But in terms of how it is that Israel continues to grab people, kidnap them, detain them, and keep them in prison, it is because Israel has always had this system of what it's kind of a misnomer. They call it administrative detention. It sounds so sanitary, and it's anything but. It's a very violent process in which people are picked up, kidnapped, usually in the middle of the night from their homes, children as young as 13, sometimes even younger, and then held without charge, without trial for a period of 6 months, where that detention can be renewed indefinitely as long as they see a judge every 6 months. And it's through this system of administrative detention that we've seen roughly 40% of the male population be thrown in prison at one point in time. That's roughly about 20% of the entire Palestinian population has spent time inside of an Israeli prison. Some administrative detention can last upwards of 11 years. A friend of mine spent 11 years of his life under administrative detention, which means without charge and without trial. Now, it's not just that, but it's the process of dehumanization that leads soldiers to be able to do what it is that they want to do with Palestinians. And since November, I've interviewed a number of Palestinians who were kidnapped and then released, and all of them have described similar torture techniques that have been used against them. And one strand that appears throughout all of these testimonies is that they say that the torture that is being meted out by the Israelis, it's unlike torture in the way that people normally think of torture, which, by the way, is illegal either way. But normally when one thinks of torture, they think of torture in order to obtain some sort of information. In this case, there is no information that's being obtained. It's simply to exact revenge and to show superiority. And so we've seen people who have already been convicted, who are serving sentences inside Israeli prisons who are also being tortured. Again, not because there's an attempt to extract information. Once again, that's illegal, but simply because they're trying to show who it is who is boss. And so the methods that have been used are things that it's even so hard to describe because it's some of the worst. It's the worst behavior of humans that I've ever heard in my life, of raping people, of torturing them. You know, one young man was telling me that at one point his hands were shackled, his legs were shackled, he was put in the fetal position and blindfolded, and around him they drew a circle in chalk, and he was kept in that position for 24 hours a day for days on end. And if he moved in any way, if he spoke up in any way, if he crossed the chalk line in any way, that was a sign that he should be tortured, and he was. And when they torture Palestinians, it's a torture that is witnessed by others. The only time that the blindfold is removed is to be able to see another Palestinian being tortured. And so the testimonies that we've heard of the ways that people are being held, the conditions under which they're being held, is horrifying. And yet it's not even moving the needle inside Israel, because everything is justifiable. And because everything is justifiable, this, of course, is going to continue. And that's why you see the riots that we see.
And in terms of it being broadly accepted, this kind of brutalization towards Palestinians within Israel, I'm struck by the fact that these break-ins by these activists seem to happen quite a bit.
Yes.
Whether it be along the border into Gaza, wow, I don't know, somehow security just seems to fail all the time. And these activists who want to starve everybody in Gaza to death are just able to block all the aid trucks. I mean, what could the people who are manning the border do? Or whether it be the break-in into this torture camp, concentration camp, you could argue. It just seems like, oh, they're able to get in. What could we do? Can you speak to just almost like the tacit acceptance or almost appreciation that so many Israeli guards or people who are a part of the militaristic infrastructure there, their relationship with these activists who are at the front lines of expanding Israel and wanting the genocide to ramp up and continue?
This is a great question, Emma, because I think people often make the mistake of somehow separating the Israeli security services, the police, the prison guards, the soldiers, the army, from ordinary Israelis or from, the extreme right wing. They're one and the same. This is a state apparatus, and because it's a state apparatus, it reflects on the state, and it's made up of people who are members of the state. And so because of that, we see a synergy between the two of them. We see that if you look at the West Bank, where the Israeli settlers have been torching Palestinian homes, they've been going after Palestinians and killing them, that instead of the army stopping them, they're actually aiding them. And similarly, as you mentioned, in Gaza, as the aid trucks are supposed to be making their way into Gaza, we've seen that these same security apparatuses are allowing Israelis to set up, get this, bouncy castles in front of these spaces so that they can jump on the bouncy castles, they can eat popcorn, and so that our genocide is their entertainment. And this is allowed to happen. And third, as you put it, as you already said, when it comes to Teiman and the concentration camp or the prison camp that is there, that suddenly they have no means of dealing with crowd control or to stop this riot from happening, but they seem to have those mechanisms when it's Palestinians who are peacefully protesting, who are demanding an end to the genocide, and so on. And so the two are so intertwined. These are state. It's a state apparatus, and because it's a state apparatus, it's made of people who are from the state, and it's exactly reflective of Israeli society. So they're not going to go there. They're not going to poke a hole in the bouncy castle. They're not going to tell people to move on and allow the aid trucks in. They're not going to use any method to stop the riots from entering into Teiman or otherwise. They're not going to stop the settlers from from torching Palestinian homes. They're working together rather than opposed to one another.
And the other kind of hand that's doing the other aspects of maintaining the genocide is also playing up the threat of other nations within the Middle East to Israel's security. And, what we saw, I guess, over the past 48 hours with the assassination of one of Hamas's longtime leaders, Ismail Haniyeh, who, my understanding, he was considered one of the more moderating forces within Hamas as opposed to Sinwar, and this was done within Tehran, so in Iranian sovereign space. This was also hours after there was an airstrike in Beirut. Also, again, that's this is not Israel's country, but apparently they can do airstrikes wherever they want. And that killed a Hezbollah commander, but also injured others. The United States denied any involvement, but this is so clearly an effort by Benjamin Netanyahu to get some sort of, I think, aesthetic victory as Israeli society is kind of crumbling around him, and two, to undermine the ceasefire talks, which he has been doing, and Haaretz and other reporters have highlighted this. He has been doing this now for 7 or 8 months, undermining any ceasefire process. Can you speak about that and how this is just such a farce at this point?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's not just undermining the ceasefire talks. Look, I think what's important to step back. If Israel were truly interested in having the Israelis returned, the Israeli captives returned, they know that the only way that can be done is if there is a ceasefire and if Israel releases Palestinian political prisoners. They've known this from the first day, and we're on now day 300. It's become clear that the only way that Israel can release large numbers of Israelis is if there is a ceasefire. And that's why the ceasefire that took place in the end of November is what led to the release of a large number of Israelis. But and despite the fact that he knows this, it's become clear that he doesn't care about the Israelis at all. Quite the contrary, because what he's doing is he is constantly just amping up this genocide, and not just a genocide that is in Gaza, but he's also attacking Lebanon. He's also now attacked Iran twice, because he just doesn't care about the Israelis. But more than that, he wants to set the entire region aflame so that he can stay in office.
Yep.
The public opinion polls are showing that Israelis do not want him any longer, that if anything, he's going to be the one who's held to account. Not just for what happened in October, but for his corruption that predated October. And so they're done with him. And so he knows that. And because he knows that, he's willing to set the region on fire in order to stay in power. And this is the height of narcissism when it comes to being a leader, that he's willing to put everybody in jeopardy just in order to maintain his rule. He's willing to go down and commit genocide in order to maintain his rule. And it shows the weakness of the international system. If nobody can stop this monster, then what good is it that we have a system of international laws and international courts and so on, when he's proven that all he can do is do whatever he wants and set the region on fire, because that's what's going to keep him in office and that's what's going to keep him popular.
In terms of setting the region on fire, Bradley, can we show this footage of what's coming out of Iran? This is a procession for a funeral for Ismail Haniyeh. I'm sorry, I'm terrible about pronunciations. I'm catching it from Sam. That's who I'm blaming it on. But this was some footage, and this is confirmed by CNN that the funeral procession was quite large of for the Hamas leader in Iran here. So for people listening on the podcast audience, you can see lines and lines of people down the road.
Mile at least.
At least a mile, right, in Iran. Perhaps they'll show here. Yep. there's more footage. The only reason I show that, I think that's good, Bradley. The reason I show this is because I think in the Western press, there is this incredible arrogance about what we should be doing, what we're allowed to do to a region that should be sovereign, that should be able to have democracy, to self-actualize, to have dignity, and how, with our continued support for the Zionist project, the United States delegitimizes itself to millions and millions of people. And that's why this is such a precarious moment here, with Benjamin Netanyahu and his government attempting to draw the United States into a conflict with Iran. Now, I have my doubts that Iran's going to respond to this because they have showed restraint. They did not retaliate in a way that was destructive when they could have after Israel killed some of its leaders by bombing the Damascus consulate a few months ago. So I'm not sure this will spark a regional war because of the United States also doesn't want it, even though they want to support Israel. But but you can see how Israel is attempting to draw the United States in, and what that does for widespread reception among millions of people about America and our role in all of this.
Yeah, you asked a really important question a little earlier on, and you said you weren't sure as to whether the United States knew or didn't know about this attack on Ismail Haniyeh. And either way, it's worrisome, and either way, it doesn't matter. Right. And the reason that it's worrisome is that if they don't know what their client state is doing, that's pretty bad. And if they do know what their client state is doing, that's also pretty bad, because the idea that they would be authorizing going into another country and carry out a political assassination, again, of the person who is negotiating for the end to this attack on Gaza, is pretty worrisome. And at the same time, it also doesn't really matter, because it's become proven that it's Israel that's calling the shots, not the United States. This was clear when Netanyahu went to Congress just last week, and he was very clear in saying that he's the boss. He's the one who's doing everything. In fact, he said to Biden, "You told me not to go into Rafah, and I did it anyway." It was a nana boo boo. But I think that the issue about whether the U.S. is being dragged into this, you're absolutely right. Netanyahu wants this to be a regional war with the United States not only paying for it, but getting directly involved in it, because he wants to emerge victorious. And the only way that he's going to be able to emerge victorious is if he can say that he wiped Gaza off the map, which so far he has managed to get rid of. He's managed to destroy the largest Palestinian city, which is Gaza City. He's made the Gaza Strip unlivable. And I can just see that thousands of Palestinians are going to be leaving Gaza once that border opens, because there's no way they can have a life there. So he wants to be able to say that he did that, and he wants to be able to say that he's the person who got a peace agreement with Saudi or with any other country as well. And by pulling the United States into this, that's what he's hoping to achieve, is that there will be a larger regional instability, which will then force the United States to get involved. This is exactly what he wants. And it's surprising that this administration continues to play right into his hands rather than telling him stop.
Surprising, yes. So now I would love your assessment of this. I think people think it's impolite. I don't really care about being impolite to Joe Biden because he's presided over a genocide, but I think people think it's impolite to ask this question. Has he been entirely manipulated by Benjamin Netanyahu because his brain is not seemingly working anymore, and he doesn't know when Netanyahu is humiliating him on the public stage? Like, I'm only speaking about self-interest from a political perspective, about not getting humiliated, about trying to have some dignity. I mean, all these politicians have enormous egos. As somebody who's been an advocate for Palestinians, you're Palestinian Canadian, and of course have been immersed in this for so long, like, what do you see here with the Biden-Netanyahu relationship that makes this so uniquely destructive and that Netanyahu has clearly taken advantage of?
Look, I think the big thing is that Biden has always said that he himself is a Zionist. And if you look at his record of voting, he's always been on the wrong side of history, incidentally. But particularly on this issue, he's always stood shoulder to shoulder with Israel because he is a Zionist. Now, since he authorized the genocide back in October, I think that he has not only continued to dig his heels in, but I think he's dug his heels in even knowing that this would eventually cost him the election. I think that it's a mistake to think that Joe Biden stepped down and isn't going to run just because of his age. But I think that there were other factors as well, that when you look at younger voters and people who are of conscience, they're saying we're not going to vote for Joe Biden because he is Genocide Joe, because he's been the person who has presided over this genocide. Has he also been played by Netanyahu? Yes, I think he has. And Netanyahu is somebody who has made it clear that he wants to see a Trump presidency, that he likes President Trump, which is why he went to Mar-a-Lago. And so for him, he likes having Republicans in office because it allows him to push his agenda even further. So he's trying to push this as far as possible until the next election, hoping that it will be a Trump win, so that he can then continue the next phase of his plan, which is not only the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza, but turning his sights to the West Bank as well. And we've already seen this. We've already seen him start in on the West Bank with more than 500 Palestinians killed just since October.
And Smotrich being in charge of that, and also basically removing military authority and just having the settler gangs that he's a part of being now the primary authority in the West Bank's a part of that as well. But yeah, I mean, it is just astounding to me, I guess, from a really 40,000-foot view, that Biden's emotional attachment to a Zionist project, which is a colonial project, and one that is inherently involves murdering since 1967, since 1948. It's been about ethnically cleansing and ruining millions of lives. How one can rationalize that through racism and still have an emotional connection and idealize that project in the year 2024, that's the thing that I can't put myself in that mindset. And even to tank your own electoral chances, knowing that it's this much of an emotional project for you. And I don't know. Diana, your final thoughts there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think that people realize what Zionism has meant for Palestinians and what it has done to Palestinian lives, to Palestinian land, to Palestinian bodies. When people try to downplay it and somehow talk of it in its nice version, or even they try to kind of say that it's like, oh, it's got many faces. No, there's really only one face, and that's the face that I and so many other Palestinians have lived with, which is a settler colonial movement that aims to remove us from our land. And in the process of removing us and erasing us, it's violent on every single level. And to somehow buy into this violence and think that this is okay is really, it's not even troublesome is the word, but one would expect that in the year 2024, that there would be a wake-up call, that people would ask Palestinians, what's it like to live under Zionism? What is it like to live under this settler colonial regime? And we can easily just point to what Israel is doing in Gaza, because that is what Zionism is about. It's about killing Palestinians. It's about erasing them. It's about destroying their homes, taking over their land, and pretending that somehow everything is lovely. It's a project of Jewish supremacy at the expense of Palestinians who are the indigenous people. And it's terrifying and really must come to an end.
Diana Buttu, Palestinian lawyer, former advisor to the negotiating team of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Diana, any place else there where people can find your work that you'd like to plug here?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter or X at Diana Buttu, also on Instagram, and I have a podcast that's called This is Palestine, where you can hear a lot about the stories that are not being covered in the mainstream corporate media.
Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, with that, we're going to wrap up the free part of this program, head into the fun half where we will take your calls, we will read your IMs, all that good stuff. The number is 646-257-3920. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning, we released a conversation with Darna Noor about a Texas oil billionaire on Tuesday, and also for patrons, patreon.com/Left Reckoning, David and I talked with Sean KB of the Antifada about Sean O'Brien's speech at the RNC and what motivates that, where we are in labor, and why that might not be, why you might not expect a pro-GOP labor, or pro-labor GOP to emerge from this, but patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
And on ESPN, we talked a bit about the Olympics. We talked about Israel's cold welcome there from a variety of different people. I talked about and ranted a bit about the Giants on Hard Knocks and the whole Saquon of it all. And then we also talked about the 2 mega contracts given to quarterbacks that raised some eyebrows, youtube.com/ESPN show. And now we have Brandon Sutton. Hello, Brandon. It's going well. What's happening on the discourse?
We have a new episode out for patrons on the Patreon, obviously, discussing Kamala Harris's possible VP picks in the escalating situation in Israel. So, go and join, become a patron. $1 gets you all the episodes. So, what can I say? I'm very generous.
That is very generous. That you're beating our prices.
You're undercutting, yeah.
It's a little messed up, to be honest.
We need to start price fixing around here.
Yeah,
I'll raise it, but I'm shadow banned on Twitter, so I can't grow my base.
That's
offer
true.
These fire sale prices.
You could pay, $5 a month and get that blue check. Although, honestly, now that I've gotten it back, I almost want it to go away because I didn't pay. He just bequeathed it to me.
It was nice flying under the radar for a little bit.
It is nice, and now everyone hates me. So,
well, if I pay for the blue check and I still don't get a lot of attraction, then I have to admit that it's because I'm bad at posting, and as opposed to some sort of
Right. It's good to have the excuse.
Exactly.
Right. I get to cope.
You want me to pay to not have an excuse anymore, please?
Exactly.
No one could ever excuse you of being bad at posting. I just got to be real there, Brandon.
All-time poster.
If I want to pay for no longer coping, I'll get a therapist. That's my belief.
All right. Well, keep us abreast of that. All right. We will head into the fun half since we do not have Matt Binder. Soon enough, we shall. The number is 646-257-3920. See you there.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the Majority Report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and...
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Well, look at how sad he's become now. We shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job. Tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing.
Willy Wonka tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing.
What's that offered a tour?
That's a real thing. That's real thing. thing. Real thing. That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real boy. That offered to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered to work. That's a real thing. That's
poker with the boys. I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's
poker with the boys.
That offered to work. That's a real thing. That's poker.
Let's go, Joey.